Johnson and the campaign really initiated the discussion of adopting a new form of governance for Sacramento. When he was elected in really his first month of office, the mayor and his supporters came out with a proposal to do that, to move to an executive mayor system. That there's been a lot of back and forth on that. The council, when they were first presented with that initiative, thought that a more inclusive public process was needed, and so they created the Charter Revision Commission that was comprised of 9 members, members of the committee chosen by members of the city council, and then 2 popularly chosen members from across the city that were chosen by the city council. So there were 11 members in total. That group met for just under a year, held probably more than a dozen community meetings where we went out into every part of the city, talked to people about our form of government. We really wanted to educate them about what we have now and kind of what's on the table in terms of what the mayor is proposing, and also other alternatives of what other cities have what other cities have in terms of their form of governance. At the end of that process, the city's Charter Revision Commission really didn't offer much of anything in terms of reforms to the city's charter. The city council didn't, and the commission was really just an advisory commission. The city council really didn't take much, didn't do much with those recommendations, and the mayor submitted his signatures that he had collected on his initiative. He worked with the council, a bare majority, agreed to place that measure on the ballot for this June, and then a couple months later, opponents of the measure sued to say that the initiative process was not a valid process for making significant changes to our city's governance structure. That lawsuit was upheld, and basically all the Sacramentans that signed signatures to place governance reform on the ballot at this point don't have any option to vote on that at the ballot box. So we're kind of back to square one, and I think what brings us here to this process is that the mayor and the supporters of charter reform recognize that they need to work with the council, they need to work with the public and the community to educate and inform people about what's at stake here, what we need, what they see is wrong with our current process, what could be improved. And so that's what really brings us all here tonight. As a member of the Charter Review Committee, I take seriously the job to outreach and talk to people all across the city about ways to make our city better, make it more efficient, make it more accountable, make it more responsive. And so I'm grateful to be a part of this discussion here tonight. At this point, I think we'll turn it over to Kunal, who will talk about what is currently being proposed to the council. And I think we'd like to hear from our hosts, SPOA and Local 522, about what they see the state of the city and kind of their reactions to this proposal. And then we want to hear from all of you who are taking some time out this evening to be with us and share your perspective. So thank you very much. Kunal.
Thanks, Chris. Good evening, everyone. As Mark said, my name is Kunal. I'm the Mayor's Chief of Staff. And what I'd like to do is hopefully everyone out here has a one-page handout, which is a draft of the 5-point plan that the Mayor will be proposing to Council next month. And the goal here is to create a framework that the Council can use to then make specific decisions on each of these pieces, translate them into legal language, and then put something on the November ballot for the whole city to vote on. And Chris touched on a little bit of this. I'll walk through the plan in a second. I'll just give a little bit more context than my candidate Ashley. So a little bit of context. Chris hit on this. Why is the mayor's office doing this? This is a very challenging issue. It's not something that a lot of folks wake up and think about. Most people, if they're worried about the government, they're worried about schools, they're worried about cops and firefighters, they're worried about their jobs and all that. local governance is not something that a lot of citizens immediately come to mind, but it's incredibly important because it's about what gets done and how it gets done. And from the mayor's perspective, a pretty large group of people in the city, they're not happy with how the current system works. And we hear a lot every day from constituents who are frustrated on a whole range of issues. Public safety is a big one, and that's why this was a forum that was put up. The economy is a big one right now. Sacramento has a 13.5% unemployment rate. We're reliant on government jobs, we're reliant on real estate jobs, and people are frustrated by that. And because we're so reliant on government, when the government makes decisions, it affects a lot of Sacramentans, be it through budget or through furloughs or through layoffs. So public safety, the economy, the budget itself, which is a big issue before the council right now, is also something that a lot of people have opinions on. They wonder why Sacramento is in the position it is having year after year of deficits. They wonder why people didn't think a little bit ahead of time that this might happen and maybe save a little bit here and make smarter decisions. And then I think that overall we do get a sense that people are just frustrated in general in the city hall. They think that maybe the individual players are good people, but the system doesn't work sometimes, and things take too long, or it's very dysfunctional, or if people don't make decisions with the long term in mind, and there's not enough of an emphasis on results and too much emphasis on process and bureaucracy. So people get frustrated. So that's where we're coming from, in this being something we consider to be a priority for the cities. How do we fix the system so that we can get more done, so that our streets can be safer, so that we can create more jobs, so that we can do a better job with the budget, and restore a little bit of faith in how local government works. And so Chris alluded to the original plan. Raise your hand if you remember the original initiative. I'm sure a lot of folks in here heard about the original initiative. This is a debate that's been going on for a good 18 months, if not longer now. And we got some parts of that right, and there were some parts we didn't get right. And I'll honestly say that the biggest thing the mayor, one of the core values of our mayor is accountability. He lives it in his own life, and it's important in the city. That if you're in a leadership position, if citizens hire you to do a job, then you're accountable when you do well, and when things don't go well, you're also accountable. And his frustration, his fundamental frustration with the way things work right now, is that there's not enough accountability. And it's not because the individual people are bad people, but if something goes wrong, the mayor can legitimately say, well, hey, I'm not the chief executive. It's the city manager who's really running the show. So then you go down and you talk to the city manager. City manager says, well, I am the chief executive, but I report to a board of 9 people. So then you go to the council, and the council says, well, the mayor's the mayor of the city. He's the one that was elected by the whole thing. And again, it's not about individual people being bad people. It's about the system being set up that is really hard to identify as a citizen who's making decisions, who is really accountable. When the budget is bad, and when the economy is bad, who's standing up and saying, hey, that's my job to fix it. And you can judge me as a voter on whether or not I'm doing a good job. And so the fundamental, if you take nothing else from this plan, and there's lots of components to it, the number one thing we're trying to do, and that's why it's called the accountability plan, is make leaders accountable to voters. Not just some of the leaders accountable to voters, but all of the leaders accountable to voters. So the mayor is accountable to voters, the council is accountable to voters, but the way that our government works right now is the chief executive of the city, the person who deploys the 4,000 to 5,000 people who are protecting your streets and cleaning, keeping them clean, and transportation and all the stuff that the city does. That person is not directly accountable to voters. And in a small town, that works okay, because the issues are small enough and the city's small enough that there's still a lot of, there's not much distance between the voters and the people running it. But as the city gets bigger, it becomes harder and harder for voter priorities to be realized through the system if the person running the city isn't directly responsible to voters. So in our original initiative, we got the accountability part right. What we didn't get right was the checks and balances part. And that's what I think a lot of folks got concerned with, and I think legitimately, is that we certainly didn't have that in mind, and that wasn't, I think, the intent. We wanted to put more accountability on people who voters expect to be accountable. But it's absolutely fair for people to say, you know what, we got to have checks and balances there too. We got to protect. We got to hope for the best, but we got to plan for the worst. And so what I want to do is walk you through this plan with that kind of in mind. That number one, this is still fundamentally about accountability. It's about a government where the leaders are accountable to the voters. But what we're trying to do now is create some more checks and balances so that voters can feel comfortable that, yeah, we want to give the right level of authority to the